Hello, everyone. It is me, the one and only, the world famous Settler's Lament. And apparently, people are complaining about me being late. Cringe Walker here is complaining about it. Well, it's not my fault. Okay. Why? Because I run the channel. Two, because I have more subscribers than almost every person here. I mean, not here, like talking with me, like Dave has more subscribers, but I mean, like everyone in the chat, everyone here that's complaining. Like Cringe Walker, how many subs do you have, Cringe Walker? Do you think you have any right to complain? Maybe Cringe Walker, when you have more subs than I have, you can come here, you can come to my channel and complain. But for now, that's just not an option. I am objectively more important than you. That means you can't complain about me being late. But that's besides the point. Because as you can see, Charlemagne isn't here, even though he's supposed to be here. He's even in the title. Made it in the title. It didn't even make it in the video yet. Now, he says he'll be coming. But I would like to blame him for us being late. I think it's entirely his fault. Now, if Charlemagne were here to defend himself, he would say that he told me before the stream started that he was going to be late. But I don't really think that matters. I feel like Charlemagne is the one that should get all the blame. So yeah, today, what are we doing? I mean, the title sounds pretty lame. Does America have two right-wing parties? Dave was saying before we started that, I mean, we can just blow on this and the thesis falls apart. America obviously does not have two right-wing parties. But we're going to be analyzing this a bit. But really, there's one reason why I'm doing this, and that's because academic agent asked me to. So yeah, I mean that's pretty simple. That's why today I'm called Minion's Lament, because I feel like I'm playing the role of academic agent's minion. So yeah, I mean before we start playing the video, because we are going to be going through this, it's only 12 minutes. Is there any initial thoughts anyone would like to get through?
Yeah, I would say like my initial thought, because I watched it before this, and it's completely wrong, but it is wrong in a very bizarre way. to the point where, I mean, my main criticism of it is going to be that, why is neoliberalism considered right wing unless I guess you're a communist, which this guy seems to be at least sympathetic towards.
I wouldn't say communist. I would say Maoist distributist.
Yeah, I would say he's certainly a communist, right? Isn't that this is a bread tuber, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't look at his channel, but he says at the end explicitly that talks about socialist theory. So I mean, I'm not sure which type of socialist he is, but he's some type of socialist.
Okay, I need to bring up some necessary context. So I'm usually kind of in and out on Adams and Sitch's stream, which is where this obviously comes from. And I think we might be discussing the less interesting of the two controversies that erupted on this stream. But while I was watching them, they said that this guy who did this video, he has another YouTube channel where he like races sports cars and reviews them. $100,000 sports cars, like ridiculously expensive cars. And this guy is like incredibly privileged, and he's like, then he runs like this like little communism racket on the side. Did you guys hear this too?
No, I had no idea about this. The guy that made this video has a sports car review.
I want Chad to confirm this, but this is what I heard from when I maybe they looked this up and discovered that it was a different guy, but this is the same guy who has this. He's basically like he reviews luxury products. That's his main thing.
Before car ownership of that kind is not cheap, and to review them is not cheap either, because you have a lot of other associated costs. I mean, it's all very egalitarian, isn't it? It'd be consistent with their philosophy, as it always is. These people never indulge in hypocrisy.
Well,
Champagne Socialist number 1042.
Sure, but
which is of course much worse than a Champagne Mouse Distributist like 21st Minion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the thesis I'll try to probably advance in this conversation is that this is all kind of cope for one common phenomenon that BreadTube is running into right now, and that's the phenomenon that it's basically getting way too rich to be considered authentic. So it needs to defer to these very bizarre narratives to try to justify its existence.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah,
it's
I
kind of
just
true.
Googled this right now, and I'm just doing this on the fly, and this isn't a different channel. This is his same channel. He had at least one video that I see reviewing some luxury cars. So I don't know if this was like the thing he did at one point or what.
I heard it was the thing he did at one point, and then he changed to this or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know he says at the end of this video that we're reviewing today, that he he made the switch to doing socialist theory, that before he did something else. And I guess this is something else he did previously. I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, of course the classic leftist rejoinder to this type of thing is always that you're telling me that I'm not allowed to live in society and advocate for changing society. Now, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that sounds convincing to anyone. I guess we might have some morons in the audience. You know, me having interacted with my audience before, it seems like there are quite a few morons in my audience. But obviously, the problem with this argument is we're not complaining that, like, I don't know, this guy goes to Denny's or something, that he's not like living like a monk. We're complaining that he's partaking apparently in some of the most ostentatious consumption possible. That, you know, he apparently was driving around cars that most people could never imagine for his job.
Yeah, the you know, Hassan Piker, right? He said the other day that really the fundamental thing about communism is that poor people should be more rich. So communism is just about having everyone make more money. So individual communists should try to make as much money as possible by as many means, because that's how they're materially fulfilling Marx's desire for everyone to become richer.
So basically, participating.
So Marxism is basically just anarcho-capitalism.
Yeah, it's like Ayn Rand Marxism, basically. It's
what kind of, that's like some 5D chess stuff right there.
Oh yeah, it's insane.
The socialist great man is going to lift all boats.
Yeah, also
just
looking at this guy's channel briefly, the very first video he ever did on this channel, or at least the oldest one that's still listed, there could be older ones, is a video blaspheming Mother Teresa. So that's nice. He also has another video where I'm assuming he's debunking prayer from the thumbnail.
But this is all boring new atheist stuff that was popular in 2009. This is not even original. He's just doing whatever everyone else does. It's just, you know, this is a Christopher Hitchens thing. Everyone in 2009 came out with a let's bash Mother Teresa. And it was just like unoriginal. It was just cringe because it was so obvious that they're all copying Hitchens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I didn't know any of this stuff with this guy's history. Let's see. I don't know. I don't see anything else in chat giving us any more history on this guy. But yeah, that's very interesting.
But I know that's unoriginal, obviously, new atheism. But it really makes you think that that's where this started from. I don't know. It's just, and then the archetype of this kind of person, it definitely is this upper middle class mentality, where, I mean, all the people, most of the people that, you know, have some kind of distant or some kind of reaching out ideology, it tend to be upper middle class and just don't really have any problems. So they just aspire to things that they can imagine in their free time. But also, because like all the talking points of this video is stuff that I internalized when I was 13 and I was like a Bernie bro. Kind of weird, right? But all this, I completely understand the archetype of this kind of person. And it definitely is this kind of upper middle class, like noblesse oblige, commie kind of situation. That's what it really seems like, because he engages in a lot of class reductionism here. I think it's kind of like the performative, like noblesse oblige, like this is how I really am caring for the underlings.
He imagines he's going to be part of the Politburo. He's not the person that says, I wanted to be a genderqueer artist, not working in the sulfur mines. No, he's going to be the one enforcing the ideology.
Right. So to get an idea of him, it's not that he's like just a Stalinist or whatever, or a tanky. He's more like that social democracy, like democratic socialist type. like really the Bernie bro camp. Because watching this video, it was like I was brought back in a time machine 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's like the 2016 Bernie campaign. It's like, what?
You can kind of see the hints of neoconservatism in this as well, right? They had a similar attitude about how they were going to remake the world and their image, and they were going to be the saviors. And it sort of shows the common Trotskyist influence.
Mm-hmm. Where's Settler?
We lost the host.
It's okay. I am the sub host. So
I've returned.
You're the assistant regional manager, or assistant to the original manager.
Yes, and this person is claiming that his other channel is Grand Test Auto. I looked it up, and I do indeed see a channel named that. I don't know if this is his channel. But yeah, I don't know. But there is a channel about testing cars called that. So sorry, what were you guys saying?
We were just saying how he's like a Bernie bro, and this video reminded me of 2015, 2016 Bernie campaign that I internalized.
I also brought up that there's sort of a weird sort of Trotskyist commonality where there's this simultaneous materialism combined with a savior complex that seems sort of a degraded form of. Someone else brought up noblesse oblige, but definitely there's an element of that where you're a total materialist and yet at the same time you're saving everyone.
And you connected it to the neocons there, right?
Yeah, because the neocons used to be communists. They used to be Trotskyists.
Hitchens, anyone? Oh, unoriginal new atheist there?
All of them.
No, I know. But it's like Hitchens is like the quintessential where he was like right. And then he just literally, it's like, did he get paid by someone? It was almost inexplicable, even by his gigabrain brother, Peter Hitchens, who's way, way smarter. He's like, I talked to him privately and publicly, and it's just like, he just became a neocon after 9/11 because there was this vigor in him feeling like this is the new way for us to save the world. Like you were just saying.
Yeah, it's really strange. I don't know. Maybe we should watch the video and more revelations will come to us.
Yeah, sure. Let's get started with that.
Possible by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support this channel and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
Yeah, please, everyone, very important. Remember to donate to the guy that reviews luxury cars. I'm sure with the million subscribers he has, he's barely making ends meet. So make sure to donate to us.
And absolutely do not subscribe to and do not donate to Settler's Lament.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, normally I would beg for the money, but clearly this guy needs it more than me. So patreon.com/secondthought, everyone.
Believe it.
And hey, Charlemagne's just joined. Charlemagne, you have anything to say?
Yeah, sorry for being slightly late. I mistimed the length of a movie. So in terms of this is CPAC. Is this the video?
Yeah, we were just about to start.
Is that the humble pillow salesman?
I think that's Ted Cruz.
That's Ted Cruz.
Oh, I thought that was Mike Lindell.
This video left me utterly speechless. I listened to it on
because it was so stupid.
It was more than that. It's the literal inversion of like Mencius Moldbug's theory of how the government works. So
it's also like my idea of it is that it's like he's inherently just saying like, why is being a war hawk inherently right wing? It's just bad things are this is like the Dinesh D'Souza thing just in reverse of, well, all of the bad things, those are just right wing, whereas the good things, that means it's the more good thing is a good thing that I agree with, the more left wing it is. So for history begins in 1950, right? The neocons and Reagan, that's always been what all conservatives have always believed for all time, right?
Yeah, to answer one of the comments here, Patreon check. Apparently he has 3,000 patrons.
How much money is he making?
It doesn't show the amount.
Oh.
Well, this guy has over 1 million subs, right? Am I correct? I mean, it's insane. Like,
So I mean, 3,000. If that's like $5 a month on average, that's a lot of money.
Well, I mean, we know that Hassan Piker, what was his income from Twitch? $200,000 a month.
Yep.
Over that, so he's making like close to multiple millions of dollars a year. I mean, and it's just, it's kind of mind-boggling. What's so funny is that Hassan he's literally like this gem bro, like, chud type. It's so bizarre. I don't know. It's just so ironic that they like calling people grifters.
Yeah. Very true. So sorry, Charlemagne, was there anything else you were saying, or should we get back to the video?
No, let's get through it, because I'm hoping we can actually get through every single moment of the video, because it's just so good.
Yeah, it's only for the audience. It's only 12 minutes long. It's linked in the description if you want to check it out yourself. But it's pretty short. So,
but I do recommend drinking while watching it, because it's hard to get through.
But yeah, so let's get going.
Bit or not, the Republicans are not the only major right-wing political party in America. Of course, there are smaller conservative groups like the Libertarian Party and the Constitution Party, but for all intents and purposes, and contrary to what you've probably heard your whole life, the Democratic Party might as well join them on that list.
Okay, can we pause already?
A party that blocks...
So wait, the Democrats are the real racists then, right?
Yeah, no, I mean that is what most lefties believe. That I just retweeted the other day something from he's not the most serious person, but Tariq Nasheed, where he was making that very point that
Uncle Buck.
Democratic and that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both racist parties, is essentially what he was trying to say.
The thing that really stood out to me here was that he actually claims that the Libertarian Party is a conservative party. I mean, I was on a show today with Peter Quinones, and one of the major complaints from the Libertarian side is that the Libertarian Party has become a party of degenerates, basically. Like 2/3 of it is just nothing but degeneracy. So the idea that, to him, the Libertarian Party, not just libertarians, the party is a conservative party. I mean, what? It's like, how do you even look at the Libertarian Party and think that?
Because for communists and socialists like this guy, it's kind of like, during the World War II era, you'd have people like, well, both the fascists and the communists are just the same, are two sides of the same authoritarian coin. Or the communists would say, well, the fascists and the capitalist liberal democracies are just they're all capitalism, So I'm thinking that's kind of where he's coming from, where anything that isn't just all out socialism, Green Party stuff is just inherently conservative right wing.
And I would also say...
Okay, no, but, in this guy's defense, I think the argument he's basically making is that all of these are sort of bourgeois, pro-neoliberal parties.
Yes.
And if we just translate his thesis, away from right-wing, if we understand that obviously none of these parties are very socially conservative, but he's not talking about it. He's talking about economics primarily here. Right. Is his thesis that all the parties are neoliberal parties? If that's all he means, isn't that correct?
More or less. That's the thing I was going to kind of agree with him on, right? Is that he's just, it's like, in the same way we would consider that the fact that the Democrat and Republican Party, conservative labor are all ultimately still serving the same neoliberal world order that we're opposed to. I guess he's basically saying that in the same way, just from the other side. I'm just saying I don't see how neoliberalism is right wing, unless you're a communist.
So I guess, it's very obvious that our elites have a very common vision. They essentially want to run zero interest rate I hate the word capitalism. They want to run zero interest rate capital markets in perpetuity, where you basically just print indefinite amounts of money to support, some amount of social welfare, and that this is sort of divided up by a spoil system at a democratic level. And I don't know. I think this is, what do you call this system that's being proposed, right? I think didn't the initial people who thought all this stuff up in the 80s and 90s call themselves something like the third way? I know it sounds a lot like the third position from the 30s, but wasn't that a thing?
I mean, Bill Clinton, or I don't know if Bill Clinton himself used the term, but the like Bill Clinton movement referred to itself as the third way.
Didn't Tony Blair kind of imply that too?
Yeah.
Well, he was
I mean,
like
I don't know if they actually used that phrase, but that's what the movement was described as.
Yeah, and so that's the reigning order. So, I guess if status quo is a direction, I think the problem is it breaks down to how we ordinarily use the term right wing, and it breaks down on any historical analysis.
Yeah, I don't think this guy really has any like historical context at all, basically. I think he's just literally thinking in terms of history, he's just thinking like the last 20 years, because none of this would make any sense, even the Steelmans that you're just talking about, if you went previous to the 90s. So I think that's just the one giant blind spot, is that he just completely discounts any history at all. Because how could you, because even in, his basic like internalized center left progressivism assumptions, if you go back far enough, it's going to be, way more right wing. And that was before progress. So,
well, the arguments again, they're looking solely at capital, at capitalism. So I guess the argument that they would use is that there are a lot more nationalized industry and there's a lot more union participation just in, say, the 60s or 70s. And especially if you talk about, say, the UK, that's definitely true. So again, to Steelman, that he'd basically say that when he says right wing, what he means is neoliberalism, and what he's referring to is the privatization that has happened since then.
Yeah, that would make more sense.
But yeah, I just quickly want to do a couple super chats first before we get back to this. Sargon's video and evolution. That's it. I mean, I haven't seen this. Sargon did a response to the admin stitch abs situation. I haven't been able to see it yet. It sounds very interesting. I don't know. I'll probably do something in relation to it once I have seen it. But I guess that's what this is in response to.
That's a good video, because I think it really has completed an end of an era. Right, because when I started YouTube, the first video that kind of put me on the map at all was a video talking about how, what do they call it, liberalists, or was it cultural libertarians? I forget which one he was using at the time, but it was basically a critique of this in isolation. And now we have Sargon of Akkad basically declaring himself to be a follower of Roger Scruton. And so I think that this is really a transition in the dialectic, at least on YouTube. No, but that I'm going to derail, so I'll just shut up about this.
Yeah, no worries. And also, Chris W for $1 says nothing. Thank you very much, Chris. And I think that's it. Yeah, just wanted to get those out of the way. So yeah, back to the video, I guess.
Yes. Let's continue.
Movement to the left passively accepts movement to the right, and sometimes even embraces conservatism outright. In this episode, we're looking.
Okay. Let's see what was that. I want to see what was on the screen there.
Sometimes even embraces conservatism outright.
Biden administration increases border deportations and prosecutions to deter migration.
The dictionary definition of conservatism is how many deportations there are.
No. Okay. Literally, what this guy is saying is not allowing unlimited levels of illegal immigration is conservatism.
Well, this is so stupid anyway, because the Biden administration is letting in vastly more of people in the first place. So it's like, you let in more people to deport, you deport more people. I mean, duh. It's not like, you know what I'm saying? It's not like he's deporting people even more that were already here. Look at what just happened. Like, what was it, 2 weeks ago with the giant camp of Haitians coming in? I mean, of course, there's more deportations when literally 10,000 people walk across the Rio Grande. I mean,
and I mean they and it's all it's just ridiculous. Like, the Soviet Union, the Red Bloc and the Eastern Bloc in general had had strong border security. You know, maybe in the opposite direction, but they still had strong border security.
Soviet Union never existed, guys. Soviet Union is a capitalist myth. It never existed. Communism has never been tried. So you need to shut up and check your privilege. Man, how long has it been since we've heard that phrase?
Yeah, no, it's just like I know it's hard to even critique this. Like all I have to do is like read the headline and like compare it, like say what he said. Like there's nothing really to say. The concept of border security is right wing. This is literally what he is saying.
I mean, does he not? Does he? I'm asking legitimately. Does he not believe that there should be borders?
I mean, I'd imagine no.
He's a Marxist socialist in the.
I know Bosch actually always says that that borders should still exist until we reach full communism. Now, I mean, I think Bosch's version of borders would be quite a bit different, even under current circumstances, than what any normal person would say. But I don't know. I mean, maybe this person would give some sort of weak defense to it, saying, you know, I'm not saying like complete open borders, guys. I'm just saying that if anyone tries to cross the border, they shouldn't be stopped.
Well, I think there needs to be a meta observation here, because obviously, you know, as Charlemagne was saying, I don't think this guy seems to be very rigorous if he's saying things like obviously if there's more imports, then there's going to be an increase in deports, even though the proportion is worse and everything. So I think there's just, you know, a low level of rigor, and we just have to look at what is this guy really feeling. I think it's that, you know, the Zoomers, millennials, so used to the promises of gay space luxury communism coming in the future over time, that the center left promises them continually election after election. And I think it's just the internalization of that, where we're just supposed to logically like move towards that, not necessarily consciously, but we're supposed to gravitate over time. And because that's not happening, we are, you know, declining. We are moving backwards. And so I just think that's the general feeling underlying this.
I mean, that's even like the ideas of people like amazing atheists, right? Or the whole new atheist idea that, like, you know, the only reason we haven't made Star Trek real are these evil, regressive, conservative, religious people. Like we still have the kulaks, or we still have, you know, some remnant of the old regime that has to be that can basically just be blamed for the fact that our ideals aren't actually coming to fruition because they're insane.
Just to double up on what 21st said, there's a phraseology that's used amongst British Fabians, which is true of obviously Australian Fabians as well, as in the Fabian Society, is they use the phrase the inevitability of gradualism. And sort of, I guess what you're saying by using that space communism analogy is kind of that sort of there's this almost arrogant assumption that things will move glacially in this direction, and something that doesn't do that is a break from the narrative, and then ergo whatever that break is, whether it's a figment that resembles something like a border, as this article is demonstrating, is an obstruction to the utopia. That's how I sort of see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. So I'll keep on going.
In this episode, we're looking at how the Democratic Party takes advantage of the current electoral system to stop, to the best of its ability, the progress of left-wing politics, and how it even actively promotes a right-wing agenda. We're talking about something called the ratchet effect. If you've been following this channel for a while, you've probably already heard me talk about the absurdly stunted American political landscape. If you're new here, the basic idea is this. American politics lean heavily to the right. On one side of the aisle, the Republican Party espouses alarmingly far-right politics, more extreme in their nature than even some notable...
Okay, so the Republican Party apparently espouses far-right politics.
This is something that I really wanted to address, right? The whole myth that the whole stupid idea myth that European countries are inherently more left-wing, and it's like, my idea is that what leftists define as a European country is quite odd, because I think from their perspective, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada are considered European countries, and Russia is not a European country. Because would any of these people describe Russia as a left-wing country?
I would, but he wouldn't.
But what I mean, okay, because I think the only countries that they're kind of using as examples would be that are in Europe would be like Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, because France has a very large amount of right wing. I guess they could include Britain too, but like, what about Poland and Hungary and Eastern Europe? Are they just not? It's kind of like the left wing version of like the Stephen Crowder analogy, where basically, according to him, they're like the only place Western civilization really exists are just like small towns in the Midwest and the South, because, well, Europe can't be Western civilization because socialism, and that socialism is not Western civilization. But to these people, it's like, okay, only a select handful of countries, a bunch of them aren't even in Europe; they're just in the Anglosphere. Those are the European countries that are more left-wing than the United States. So all of Europe is more left-wing than the United States.
Yeah, but okay, so let's look specifically at what this guy is citing as the unspeakably far-right policies of the Republican Party. The only thing I think he shows here is Trump's proposed Muslim ban, quote unquote. So if what they're referring to here is the ban he actually did put in effect, where he banned immigration from 8 Muslim majority countries, then that's a very moderate policy that I highly doubt is that different from most European countries.
Immigration. They included the Texas abortion ban, which just got temporarily halted by a federal judge, because of course it did.
This stuff is interesting too, because his examples of what is right wing is just inversions of left wing. So just preventing the left from doing what it wants to do is like right wing. He doesn't actually seem to be giving much positive definition of what it actually means to be right wing. Like
obstructions to the creep leftwards is far rightness in whichever way that manifests, essentially.
Yeah, but so either here he is saying the policy that Trump did enact, banning immigration from those like 8 countries or however many, something like that, that he did ban immigration from temporarily, from using a list that was drawn up by the Obama administration. That is like a crazy far right policy, which it isn't. Banning immigration from countries based on being terrorism hotbeds, like this isn't anything that radical. I really doubt it's anything that much more radical than most European countries. Or what he could be referring to is just the more broad concept of a Muslim ban, of banning any Muslim from immigrating to the United States. I'm not really sure if that ever seriously was Trump's policy, but that's at least what the left claimed Trump's policy was. Now let's say that was Trump's policy. And even if that's the case, one of the 2 things he's able to cite is a thing that Trump said on the campaign trail and never got anywhere remotely close to becoming law. Like that, this is just obviously ridiculous. And the other thing, okay, the abortion ban. I mean, the abortion ban is only like it's illegal after 6 weeks, I think, in Texas. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
And what are the laws right now in Poland?
Oh yeah, I mean it's illegal in almost all cases in Poland.
Poland's not a European country, though.
Yeah, Malta also. But I mean, in Europe,
Ireland until just a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean in Europe, in almost all of Europe, abortion is only legal up to 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, there's no similarity here. Especially considering the Democrats are currently right now in Congress trying to decriminalize abortion at any point. As the laws.
That's demonic.
Now, okay. I want to give the left wing apologetic. They are not saying necessarily that you should have abortion on demand for a 3rd trimester. What they would say is that it should be regulated by the medical industry, and like if doctors want to refuse to give 3rd trimester abortions, they can.
Unfortunately, they're liars, like the father.
Yeah, the reason I have to give that justification, I need to explain that part, is a lot of the time people will say that in Canada you can get a 3rd trimester abortion. That's not really true. It's not illegal, but the medical industry is self-regulating. Canada does only, quote unquote, have elective abortions for the first 2 trimesters. There's just no law against the third trimester. But the medical industry still does prevent at least that for now. But yeah, so this is the guy's examples. Either the very moderate ban that Trump did put in place, or something that Trump never got anywhere close to passing, and an abortion ban which is very standard, very common throughout the world. And it's actually quite a weak abortion ban. I mean, Texas did not criminalize abortion. Texas just allows citizens to sue other citizens for abortion, and even that's halted for now. Also, in most countries, it's not like that's not the case. Most countries where abortion's illegal, it's illegal. Like the doctor at the very least can get punished criminally. All that is in place, or was in place until this temporary halt, is civil penalties. So this is really one of the most moderate abortion bans I've ever seen.
Oh, so why do they always have to compare it to like, oh well, in other European countries? Oh, so are they saying that only European countries should be followed? Only majority white countries, only their policy should be followed? Are you racist?
What's interesting on that instance regarding European countries is that you've got the issue that for the left, and obviously in this case it's America, but this is true to some degree of Australia and Britain as well, is that they'll sort of say, oh, on the continent they have these programs and they're socialized or they're centralized within the government, ergo this is an endorsement of socialism. But then they sort of ignore the other factors where these countries also, by and large, largely homogenous, or these countries also have cultural homogeneity, or what other factors are included. They completely ignore the on-the-ground reality of these countries and merely will cherry-pick these certain instances of this European country's got this policy, or this European country's got this welfare safety net. And if we don't have it, we're not really socialist, we're not really left-wing. They sort of really play the double-faced game on this one.
And on top of that, and like again, take a country like Hungary, or like I imagine a lot of European countries, they'll have like incentives for families, financial incentives for families. Would they say that that's inherently left wing if they're using economic means to help promote creating larger families?
I guess the question I'll ask is who's having the babies, but that's a separate discussion.
But the answers to these questions are pretty obvious if you're asking this person, right? He would say pro-natalist policies are right wing. But insofar as him classifying European countries as more left-wing, it's basically a no true Scotsman thing. He's basically saying they're more left-wing on us on all of the issues I want to be relevant for this talk right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think essentially, like, he takes a default, like, social liberalism and whatever that's just inculcated into his brain from like the water or whatever, and then his focused frame is really class reductionism, and that's typical for a Bernie bro of this kind, or a Dem sock like him. I would also say it's a few milliseconds after the Trump clip that we're seeing here, but he brings up the far right parties like the National Rally in France, then Alternative for Deutschland.
He brings up UKIP.
Oh, and UKIP. These kind of more noisy, more public-facing populist right, reactions that have happened in the past 5 years. Of course, he gets caught up in the noisiness because they don't cause true policy change, but at least they're front-facing and cause some noise. That might be, a steel man for him.
I mean, has UKIP been relevant at all in the past 5 years since the Brexit vote?
As soon as Farage left them, they've become completely irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
They really always just only had their support from him.
Well, think of it this way: the last in an electoral context, the last time Nigel Farage was involved with politics, he basically ran as a Brexit party. Oh, they developed a Brexit party around him, aside from UKIP, because UKIP had sort of imploded on itself, and the Brexit party scored a great quantity more votes than what UKIP did, which was the other party that Farage had founded beforehand. So make of that what you will.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So sorry, did someone want to say something? Okay, I'll keep on going then.
Far-right parties in European politics, like the National Rally in France and UKIP in the UK. Often left out of the story, though, is that the Democratic Party is also on the right. Perhaps not by US standards, but in the range of political ideologies, both parties are devoted to neoliberalism and the ideology's strict adherence to free international trade, austerity, and highly privatized economies. This means that at the end of the day, Democrats and Republicans disagree on relatively few things, and most of those things are minor aesthetic differences or the usual hot-button culture war topics.
Can we stop right here? So
yeah, there's the class
again,
reductionism.
That and like, yeah, just saying, oh, hot button culture war issues, as if those aren't important at all. Like, you know, for abortion, it's we're killing millions of babies. Like, you can't just don't say that that's not important.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I guess this guy places the Tories in the 1800s to the left of the liberals, since apparently free trade is a right-wing thing. I mean, I would contest to this day, free trade is at best a centrist thing, if not a left-wing concept. Free trade historically, until really the time of Reagan, was always associated with the left, even if it's only like center-left liberals.
There's something I picked up on, and Charlie, think of the text that we were reading yesterday when we were with AA, the McWorld stream. The fact that, for instance, to quote this person in this video, was sort of saying that neoliberalism is right-wing. The fact that these people can conceive of the fact that liberalism itself, as either a word to be used in lexicon, or from an ideological context, is a right-wing, really goes to show how sort of warped their view is of politics and how slanted it is. If you think about that text that we read, it's really interesting.
It does kind of make sense though if they are coming at it from a Marxist perspective.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I see where you're coming from, but it still is hard to fathom when you consider sort of liberalism and its Jacobin sort of French Revolutionary origins.
Oh yeah, sure. Like, I'm just saying if you're thinking about like, well, this is like just the capitalist stage, right? These guys are the late stage capitalism before true progress happens. Yeah, you can just call them right wing.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and anything else to say, or should I go?
Yeah, keep going.
Stopping our analysis there ignores the special role Democrats play in the American political system. Democrats actively enable the Republican agenda. In politics, this is called the ratchet effect. The idea goes something like this. When Republicans hold power, the gears of the ratchet engage and the machine begins to move to the right, happily clicking along as policies pass, judges are replaced, and budgets are approved. Come the time when Democrats return to power, the ratchet...
But what long-lasting policies have Republicans implemented that have been able to stand up to, you know, Democrats not repealing it the next, 4 years later?
I
mean, I guess mainly economic policies. I mean, even that though, like
no.
Yeah, I mean,
no.
I mean, the main program of neoliberalism of privatization that has been successful. That hasn't been repealed.
Yes.
But I mean even with a lot of specific economic policies of the right, they do just get repealed. One example I can think of that is, this is a bit old now, but the say the Bush tax cuts, those were mostly gotten away with under Obama. So yeah, I don't know. What economic policies have the left gotten rid of, Charlemagne?
Well, they reset the tax rates that Trump lowered, and I mean, at this point they have asserted absolute control over who every single company is even allowed to employ. I mean, this is just totally backwards. It doesn't make any sense. Like, in what sense is the current regime reinforcing right-wing policies about like free market economics? I mean, it's just, it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, they're literally doing the opposite of this. I mean, everything that even remotely has to do with this idea of capitalism was undone almost immediately, and now they're just aggressively pursuing total control over the economy. And I mean, what was the other thing I was going to reference? I can't recall what it was. Oh yeah, it was Obamacare, right? Like, Trump did nothing but cement Obamacare, which was a left-wing policy, right? So like literally, it's just the exact opposite of what he said. And as he continues this segment here with the ratchet, this part is literally the
Republicans had
Mencius
more power.
Moldbuck's open letter describes the process.
Republicans had more power than they had since the 1920s, once in Trump's first 2 years in office, and he basically was unable to get anything done, even with Republicans. Like, they couldn't get rid of Obamacare, and they couldn't, pass a law funding the border wall. But apparently they're able to just get all these right-wing policies passed, even though he can't name any of them.
Well, really, it's another sort of example of where the secret sauce of how you might say that the left managed to sort of further agitate their own base. And I don't know if you radicalize is the right word, but the way they sort of stimulate their base is by getting the truth and doing a 180 version of it and saying, oh, well, the right-wing parties are doing this. Ergo, we need to get on the ground and march in the streets and that sort of stuff. And for example, they're using the ratchet effect, but the ratchet works the other way. I mean, name me one socially genuinely right-leaning policy that's been passed this side of the 1960s. The left have basically had unilateral victory since the 1960s in every Western country, and then they try and invert it in this way. It's so painfully obvious.
Well, like as A says in the comments here, everything he says is correct if you mirror image it. So I mean, there's a kind of sense, right? Well, there's a kind of sense where it's like he's in being fully inverted. I think it's more correct than the like distorted center where it's just kind of right, kind of wrong, but it's just the wrong kind of framework. This framework is exactly right, but it's mirrored and inverted backwards. But
yeah.
but like you were saying, Pertinax, where they always use the bait of, well, the right wing reaction is keeping us from getting to that gay space luxury communism sooner, and that's why we haven't brought it to you yet. They really do use that to justify why they haven't gotten farther and why they haven't, gone with their really insane policies yet. So essentially, he is kind of pointing to something that actually happens there, and I would say that it's kind of like reaction is like just right wing. I mean, reality is reactionary essentially. Nancy Pelosi, all the left wingers, including him, have some essence of a reactionary attitude in them. They have to wake up at a certain time of the day. They have to segment their meals, organize stuff. They have to segment things away and just order it in some way, or else they'll literally just go mentally insane, right? So everybody has some kind of reactionary disposition. It's just like a spectrum essentially. So, I mean, essentially what they're saying is that because... What?
Are you implying that Nancy Pelosi is a human? What are you talking about?
So I think there's an interesting sort of context to this. Now, I appear on Friended stream. The last few times I've been defending AA, academic agent. And I remember there's this one really weird thing I got into where I was demonstrating how most of our institutions were left-wing, and I had a few graphs based on contributions and the likes. But then one of the weird rejoinders I got, and I wasn't expecting this, was that the public schools couldn't possibly be progressive because our public schools are segregated.
Oh!
No, I mean, but no, that this is, and they said and Brendan said, it would be like having a Catholic church where everyone worships Satan. So that they can't be progressive, and I said, well, this is, and what was strange about this was it wasn't from a left winger, but there is this internalization that the left wing means the fulfillment of left wing dreams, not the enactment of left wing policies. The example I always use, it's almost getting it to be a cliche, is Berkeley, California's racial achievement gap. At some point, I imagine they'll just fake it. But this is a notion that's somehow alive and well inside the minds of people who think of themselves as moderate.
Well, yeah, but the problem is, unfortunately, and it's like it's not a happy thing, but it seems like many people, including the quote unquote centrists, their minds are distorted and become dysfunctional and darkened by the vices of liberalism, where, I mean, just the fact is, like, they can't go a single sentence without just spewing profanity all the time. I just don't think that their minds are functional for like the uses of right reason. I just think that's what's happening here. And I mean, I would say that, Adam Fredham and them are left wing, but in the video itself, the whole point is that basically, like, reality is reactionary, where they can't do immediately open borders, they can't do nationalization of everything right now, they can't do all this stuff because that would cause like immediate collapse, when really the whole power function of like the center left taking advantage of an activist like this guy is to offer them the dreams, but only benefit from periodic, like, small breakdowns of things. They don't want to destroy the entire building itself. They just want to break it down piece by piece over time, and they'll offer him the breakdown, but they that's not fitting for them.
I'm not so sure I follow the analogy entirely, but I kind of get what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying that
these categories, like left wing versus right wing. I mean, I know what Adam and Sitch represent. They represent a liberal ideal, specifically the liberal ideal of the 20th century. For me, it's just easier to say that than to try to put them in a left wing versus right wing bubble. I think left wing versus right wing sort of make a weird sort of sense in a Mulbuggian sense if you contrast them between sort of demotic or antinomian impulses, and then more authoritarian and pronomian impulses. But when we're talking about individual people being left wing or right wing, I think it's just easier to say this guy's a communist, Adam and Sitch are 20th century liberals. And in that context, the discriminate's very clear why it exists.
That's a good point, because basically the entire way he's laying out politics, where everything that's not communism is right wing, basically. It makes all politics of the last several hundred years utterly incomprehensible.
But this is not an uncommon view. That's how, in the 1920s, people would have seen neoliberal social democracy as right wing. This is not a new attitude in communists.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of another thing from that text we read, Charlie, how nationalism was sort of seen as an expression of liberty in, say, the Balkan nations rebelling against the Ottoman Empire. But then, if you fast forward to the end of the 1800s, with expressions of nationalism under, say, Bismarck, or the Kingdom of Italy, or these movements that occurred leading up to World War I, they were seen as inexorably right wing, because they were sort of, as the text termed it or phrased it, that was sort of xenophobic and parochial and these other sort of words that they used. And it goes to show that even within a word, there's transitions between left and right, and it can get muddy, like Dave is saying. I think Dave makes a good point.
Not to derail, but yeah, it's interesting, like with Germany, say, is that like German nationalism circa like 1840 would have been considered very much part of liberalism, and part of the 1848. But
Bismarck used to rage about it all the time. How's a liberal ideal,
But then he basically just, galaxy brained his way into saying, we're just going to do it my way, unite under Prussia and make it, authoritarian and based.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Except for the anti-Catholic part, but
yes. But the point is mostly true. I agree.
Yeah. So I think we'll move on a bit now. But first, I want to do some super chats. Mathis Mediocrity. The U.S. was founded under rejection of traditional power structures. So, of course, most Americans have no understanding of what conservatism even is. Yeah, I mean, true. I don't really have much to add. Anyone?
I think it's a good take, actually.
It is a good take. I do really want to get through this whole video, though, so I don't want to spend too much. Yeah,
I just want one thing I want to say is, I mean, I'm anti-American. But with that said, I really hate the American anti-Americans. You should be critical of the problems with your country's ideology, but you shouldn't hate your country. That's really cringe.
I mean, for me, like, the problem with America, I think, is we, especially because of the whole kind of obsession with the Constitution, is that we have a much harder time separating the country or like American identity from politics and government. because mass immigration kind of destroyed the kind of Anglo founding stock, a lot of the idea of identity just kind of disappeared, and now it just kind of had to default to what the state is.
Yeah. Moving on. Zed Des for $5 Canadian says money. Thank you very much. And there was one more. Where is it? Oh, is it gone? Here it is. None Yabiz for $5. Patiently waiting for Charlemagne to pull out the political trichotomy diagram to explain the subjectivity relationships.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that. I think everyone's familiar with that diagram at this point, though. I'm not sure how that would even help this guy, though, because he just sees everything that's not pure communism as right wing. So, yeah, not sure about that.
Okay, well, moving on then.
Ratchet is meant to move left, but the party acts as the pawl, immobilizing the gears, meaning the ratchet remains completely stuck until Republicans return to power and things go back to moving right again. In the real world, this ratchet effect can be seen when Democrats do any, or frequently all, of three things: passively accept movement towards the right, move to the right themselves, and block movement to the left. Let's start with that last one. It's becoming obvious that properly leftist ideas are gaining traction in the US. As I've mentioned in previous videos, more and more people are losing faith in
This is the Maoist distributist part.
I mean, it's leftist ideas have been gaining traction in the U.S. for over 100 years. I mean, in what sense does he? I can understand that he doesn't see communist policy as coming about, but he's actually saying that we're moving further and further right. In what sense are we becoming like less socialist now? I mean, all I see is we're not heading towards like the anarcho-socialist idea, but it's pretty obvious that we're basically like heading into this more managed, more distributive economy, less capitalistic, less free market. I mean, he seems to just he has this really stupid idea where it's like, but because there's these rich evil oligarchs like that it's
that are
just
all
getting more
left-wing, by the way.
Yeah, that's like capitalism and right wing winning.
So how does he explain the fact that if you have a nominal, because later in the video he will say that he won't say that the democratic process doesn't work. I mean, he's critical of the party system, of course, but he still said it's like, how would he explain the fact that, okay, well, the American people are going more left wing, yet the political system is becoming more right wing? Like, how does that work?
In the chat, actually, Polite has nailed it with this one, and I agree with him. He says the world is moving right because it's not moving left fast enough. And then I think his second comment there was, that's how the leftist mind works. Progress is the default, not progressing is the right wing. And that's exactly right. To impede the revolution is to betray the revolution, to use sort of Leninist lexicon. That's more or less their mentality at this point.
This is true.
Also, what country is he showing the statue from? What country is that?
I have no idea.
Is it a European country? But
it is highly cursed.
Yeah, I don't know.
Russia. This isn't Russia.
I mean, wherever it is, it's very strange that he has like.
Also, this is a pretty racist statue. Why are they two white people? Why isn't it a 500-pound black woman?
Yeah, no, I mean, but it just, I don't know. I imagine he would probably disavow, the Soviet Union and stuff if he was asked about it. Most of these guys usually do. So it's strange that he picks a statue like this. Another super chat. Have any of you seen Mr. Patriarch's interview with Otto on bio-Stalinism? No, I haven't. Anyone?
Is that like the evolved form of bio-Leninism? That sounds terrifying.
But I'll take that as a no from everyone.
Yes, that's a no.
Yeah. So
no for me, dog.
Capitalism and are looking elsewhere for options. popularity in socialism is on the rise, and several policies Americans have typically considered left-wing, like universal health care, increased minimum wages, tuition-free college, and the federal legalization of marijuana are more popular than ever, with around 2/3 of Americans and the overwhelming majority of Democratic voters supporting them. But these policies, and many, many others, never become law. Why? Because Democrats aren't responding to the growth in popularity of leftism. In fact, they're actively resisting it. They do this in several ways. During elections, it's as simple as Democratic elites clearing the path for their more centrist candidates, like Clinton and Biden, by handing them endorsements and the keys to their...
Who did Bernie endorse?
He cucked Clinton.
How many times? And what about in 2020? What did he do?
I think he endorsed Biden.
Oh, yeah, he did what he was told, like a good boy.
Okay, interesting.
That's how he bought his next holiday house in the Hamptons, you know.
But also, I like how all the policies he listed is literally just like the Bernie 2016 platform.
We also stress that they're not becoming law, but they literally are becoming.
Also,
law.
Hasn't weed gotten legalized in a number of states?
Yes, and like federally, I mean, this is really something it's not like they're out on the streets busting people for marijuana. It's obvious where this is headed. I mean, weed is about to be federally legalized. Healthcare is becoming more and more socialized. I mean, he's saying these things aren't becoming law and that the Democrats are preventing it, when the Democrats are literally putting the things that he's saying should be law into law. I mean,
yeah, I mean, he's saying
economically
America's becoming more right wing, but on these three issues, okay, I appreciate that it's not nearly as close on those issues as he wants yet. But on these three issues, objectively, very clearly, America is getting closer to them, not farther away.
Right. So again, I understand that he's not achieving his communist utopia, but to say that we're getting more right wing and that both parties are part of a more right wing system is just utterly deluded. I mean,
again, it's kind of like
it's completely contradictory with the factual reality. That's why it's so amazing.
For me, it's like, yeah, it makes more and more sense the more you think about it. Like, as we were saying, that being right wing means you're not going left wing fast enough. It's like if you're only going left wing at 10 miles an hour, that means you're regressing rightward because you need to be going 20 miles an hour. Or it's more like if you're going 20 miles an hour left wing, then you're just kind of stagnant. And if you're only going 10 miles an hour left wing, because you want to be going 30. And that's how we're becoming more right wing, just because we're not going left wing fast enough.
It's literally like some calculus politics or something.
The
rate of change is not fast enough.
It's almost like this guy's a materialist.
But in some way, it's feeding the machine. Like every time a video like this is made, or sort of every time there's articles that pertain to this reasoning or excuse, and which is, like Charlie said and others have said, it's an outright lie. It's how they agitate their base. It's how they agitate. For every generation that gets pumped through the colleges and universities and become sort of radicalized left-wing students by the end of it, this is what agitates them into activism. It's this it's being told this sort of candy-laden lie that your country's not moving towards the revolution fast enough. You have to engage in activism to speed it up. And anyone who imposes that is an enemy of the revolution.
That is the deep irony of this video that is just so hilarious, is that he and his audience do not understand the fundamental way in which he is actually that thing he's claiming, like the Republicans, what the Republicans are to us. Like this video, this channel, his subscriber base are the very enablers of the Democrats doing exactly what they are doing, and sort of just consolidating power into the managerial elites instead of bringing out the socialist utopia that he wants, because we're not actually moving towards communism. We're just becoming this increasingly like managerial society, and these people that we are also trying to oust are enabled by this very channel to a very deep and fundamental degree. I mean, they couldn't the system couldn't work as it does without channels like this. I mean, again, this channel has over 1 million subscribers. How many views are on the video? I mean, probably 300,000.
So what's the most depressing thing about Bosch? The most depressing thing about Bosch is it's very clear at this stage that his career is going to take this similar trajectory as his obvious predecessor, who is the Amazing Atheist. They're both these kind of middle-class, privileged slobs who come from broken homes, who are totally nihilistic, and their role is to sort of comfortably occupy a left-wing fad and then slightly react to left-wing excesses and to sell their mainly white male audience on the idea that these deviations, these wokeisms, the actual operation of power moving to secure itself, as we see in the contemporary managerial state, like you're talking about, Charlemagne, that all of these thought controls are sort of not real leftism. Please, don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And then we just get back on the plan of complaining about Republicans, complaining about religion, complaining about most healthy things that could possibly counterbalance this force. And when it really matters, TJ, the Amazing Atheist, did this whole song and dance about being against feminism and thought control, all from 2012 to 2018. And, then this last month, he said that he wants the federal government to create an administration that checks all facts and censors the ones that aren't true.
The federal government Ministry of Truth.
Yeah, he calls it the fact-check administration.
That's the seed that sort of created the Amazing Atheist. So coming back to sort of Roost, he's done a sort of a 360 in that regard, hasn't he? Something that you said, Dave.
Yeah,
that
but
was
it's important to understand it, how he's there to sell a certain. Well, no, I'm just going to finish my point. He's there to sell this very particular demographic of white men.
Mm. Yeah, no, exactly.
And so is Bosch, right? This is they're all talking to the same people.
Yeah, no, that's quite right. And I just wanted to buttress that because actually you raised a good point. And something I did want to say is that, at least, and I had this epiphany just because I saw his name in the chat, because I saw people talk about BAP, Bronze Age, is that, what is so mendacious about and what is destructive about people like, say, the Amazing Atheist and Vosh and their sort of cohorts is that, at least from sort of our people like us, we'll at least attempt to do our best to offer a solution. Like, even if it's something as sort of mundane as, eat steak, lift weights, don't watch porn, etc. Like, improve your lives. Do these little things in your own life to make your own existence better, and it will improve your own life, hopefully your family life, things around you. They're I don't know if I'm using the term correct, Dave, but you use the word like a pronomian. They're like pro-logical, they're pro-beneficial. These things may help in some way, but what people like the Amazing Atheists and Vouch do is they sucker this demographic away, and all they sell them is excuses for things being wrong, this mentality of just complaining and sort of whining in their sort of slobby this sort of mediocre existence. And that in itself is a really, really I don't know if evil's the right word, but it's a terrible thing to do to this demographic, and they're doing it and they're profiting off it, moreover, and that's doubly terrible.
They're giving the demographic an excuse. They're giving them somebody to blame for why they don't have their free holodeck virtual porn yet.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. We need to watch more. We're almost 4 minutes in, and it's 12 minutes long.
Their more powerful fundraising apparatus. The mainstream media also heavily favors these so-called moderates, offering effectively limitless free publicity and often outright slandering the more left-leaning candidates. But it doesn't stop there. Once in government, the party's attachment to centrism only grows. We see this when Biden abandons the fight for a $15 minimum wage long before it starts, leading it to fail in the Senate. We see it in the infrastructure bill going from this to this. We see it in the complete silence of high-ranking Democrats when Amazon workers and Alabama coal miners attempt to unionize or go on strike, leaving them alone and without the support they were promised by America's so-called most pro-union president you've ever seen. Everywhere you look, the ratchet is frozen in place. They aren't fighting like hell for the little guy, they're getting in his way. Now, of course, when Republicans take control of government, the ratchet...
Okay, anything to add to any of that?
I was going to say is that in a lot of ways, the opposite happened, right? It's something I think Distributist you've noticed, right? That the idea was, and I think if the left was a little smarter, what they should have done with Joe Biden is use it as a way to just kind of pivot themselves to be more centrist and moderate, to kind of curb some of the insanity of the left. But instead, they've honestly just doubled down on it. The wokeism has just gone even more and more, and it seems like, especially, and same thing with all the lockdowns, concerning what. They've just doubled down and trying to go full woke as fast as they can.
So I can't take credit for that idea. It's Angela Nagel's. She theorized in what was it, early 2021, that Biden would pull off a kind of Thermidorian adjustment back to Clintonian levels, and he'd really try to tamp down on the wokeness. Totally didn't happen. And I think it's because wokeness is just such a fundamental part of their power coalition. They can't discard it.
And if everyone needed a horse pill-sized giant black pill, forget about what happened post-2020 election. During the 2020 election, during a town hall that nobody watched, Biden's town hall, he literally received a Karen, a mom giving their child transgender question about their child being transgender. And he literally, during the 2020 election, during the general election when you're supposed to pivot to the center, he literally endorsed the child transgender medical procedure. And I just couldn't even believe my eyes or my ears. It was just, it's insane. It's like, how is this even happening?
I mean, there's also the fact that Joe Biden is clearly does not have all his faculties together and is clearly not really in charge.
Clearly, because he's literally endorsing that policy.
And he's also clearly senile.
You're being very polite as to his present status, but yes.
So I guess we'll go on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It
sure.
begins to move freely again. Policies get passed with purely performative resistance. Judges get appointed who uphold right-wing policies for decades. And the country continues trending.
Okay. Brett Kavanaugh. The resistance to Brett Kavanaugh was purely performative. Does anyone remember this? I know
yes,
it's been
remember
like 2 years now.
I know,
or something like 3 years.
Academic agent will remember it. I mean, that was unforgettable. And I mean, what is Brett Kavanaugh doing for the right? I mean, where are these epic right-wing victories we've seen held up in the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, the best we got is that they refused to take up the case for the Texas abortion ban previously. Not even like enshrining it in precedent or anything. Not taking it up, and we're supposed to have 6 Republican appointees right now. Every single Republican priority, if this worked like how the left thinks it works, every single Republican priority should be coming up to the Supreme Court and getting its stamp of approval. But like our best case scenario is that they refuse to take it. So like, I don't know, in a year or two, they can come back to them and they can side with the left.
Which doesn't even matter, I guess, now, because a federal judge that's not even part of the Supreme Court can just do this anyway.
And they're not overturning that, right? So like it does, again, the actual reality just totally contradicts what he's saying is happening here.
Yeah, it just like, I mean, even if you think the Brett Kavanaugh stuff was good and justified and epic based, I don't know how any honest person could possibly describe this as purely performative. My only explanation for this is either, I don't know, he wasn't paying attention to politics 3 years ago when that happened. How many years? I don't know off the top of my head. Or he's just lying. Like I can't imagine any other any other explanation than those two.
I mean, did he miss the part where they determined that none of the states have any standing? In December last year. I mean, what?
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. It's just that's just what he's saying. Let's go on.
Trending towards the right. When Democrats return to office, concentration camps along the southern border become immigration overflow facilities and remain open. Immigrants are told, do not come. The U.S. Embassy remains in Jerusalem despite an ongoing genocide, and military budgets continue to rise. Nothing quite illustrates the ratchet effect better than the US corporate tax rate over time. These are the taxes that corporations have to pay, the same way you and I do when we earn our income. Back in 2017, Trump cut taxes for both the richest Americans and corporations, while giving effectively nothing to the rest.
So they would pay more because they constantly just set up a headquarters in countries that have lower corporate tax rates to avoid paying them.
You don't understand. There's no rigor here.
Well, look, I mean, being right wing is, having low taxes, but then being right wing is also, taking all your money and spending it on the military. So,
I mean, that is an honest thing you can criticize like neocons on, of like, oh, we should have a balanced budget. Okay, should we cut military spending we don't need? No. Do you hate Israel?
And then the concentration camps thing. I mean,
who built the cages, Joe?
Yeah.
But this is the thing too. Like, he didn't just cut. They make him sound like a villain for having done what he's done. But in fact, he simplified taxes even for working class people and lower class people as well. Where they just completely ignore that. Heavens forbid that working class people actually pay tax and don't want a complicated tax system.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's all just crazy. Yeah. I and also I mean, you see how the language that he used there, that they tell the Democrats, say immigrants don't come here. Am I missing something? Did the I don't know whatever office oversees immigration, not ICE, like actual legal immigration, like did they say sorry because of the current world situation, no more immigration for the next couple of years? No, they didn't say that at all.
My wife immigrated here during that time. I can assure you that Immigration and Naturalization Services was working.
Yeah. No. So of course, what he means here is Joe Biden and Kamala have said, please, just for now, don't illegally immigrate here because of we're trying to shut down the entire world. And they're not backing that up. They're doing the absolute bare minimum they could possibly do.
Yeah. I mean, they're done. Then they stopped building the wall. I mean, the wall is just canceled, right? ICE is being prevented from doing their jobs, basically. I mean, it's like he takes one quote there from Kamala Harris and asserts that like this is what's happening across the board. Like it's the most dishonest framing possible. Like to just take one 3-second clip of Kamala Harris and assert that like this is the reality. I mean,
a quote is policy according to these people in a way.
Yeah, it's hard to even after this with the concentration camp stuff. It's hard to even believe he's being honest at this point.
Yeah, and the administration has also explicitly said that they will not turn around families that illegally immigrate. Anyone that has children, essentially is what that means. Going on more.
Rest of us, but the promise of an eventual fictional trickle down. With this cut, Trump brought the corporate tax rate from an already low 35% down to a paltry
a low 35%.
It was one of the highest in the world. That was the problem.
And another thing here. He said and normal people got nothing. I hate the Republican focus on taxes. I really do. I really wish that Trump, this wasn't like his big policy is the Trump tax cuts. I think it's terrible. Okay, everything. I'm somewhat sympathetic to him. No, I mean a lot specifically saying is wrong, but I'm somewhat sympathetic. But the normal people got nothing. Like the Trump tax cuts affected normal people. Like I guess the Trump corporate tax cuts didn't because normal people don't have corporations. But he also cut taxes for normal income brackets too. This is just false.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my parents saved thousands of dollars. So did I. I mean, this absolute. He's pretending that Trump only cut taxes for the big evil corporations. From a quote low 35%. Okay, I guess it's because it's not 100%, right? Like that's what he wants.
Yeah, did he quote the top tax rate? Because I think I can't remember, but I think he compares that to the top income tax rate. Well, normal people don't pay the top income tax rate. You need to be making $500,000 a year or something to pay the top income tax rate.
You need to be like the person who's making this video in order to be in the top income bracket.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, just comparing top brackets, income tax brackets are really complicated, so that doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, no, and again, it's I'm not a huge fan of the Trump tax cuts. I'm not like trying to defend that, but he's just wrong. Like, what am I supposed to say?
The taxes shouldn't matter because literally, I mean, whether we're going to have 10% higher, 10% lower tax revenue into the government every year, depending on the tax policy, the taxes are literally just used to pay the interest on the debt all the time. So this is just like basically pointless.
And especially, if they're just going to adjust the interest rate and print more money, I guess like they've assured us that just we can have an unlimited amount of debt and it just doesn't matter with the economy.
Well,
there's no inflation too. There's no inflation. Shut up. Inflation is healthy.
Yeah.
No, now unfortunately they have to conform to reality where they do have to do kind of a balancing tactic with the budget and everything so that the inflation doesn't run too hot, because if there's just high inflation, then it will be just one of those disastrous scenarios. So no, they gotta do the decline, segmented, just slow breakdown, not complete collapse, please. Just 5% inflation per year. What?
We have to we can't eradicate the working class and small businesses that quickly. we can't turn everyone into pod people and bug men just instantly. We have to do it over the course of a few decades. Come on now.
Yeah.
That's not even a joke though.
None ya biz for another $10 says, "Here is your money for tiger riding lessons." Thank you very much, None. I don't think I'll spend it on that though.
No, you don't get it.
No, I know it's a joke. I'm making another joke. 21st. Shut up. Going forward.
20%, shifting the tax burden even further onto the shoulders of average Americans and away from his party's corporate donors and himself. Thankfully, Biden is bringing it back up to 25%, 28% if we're lucky, 7 to 10 points lower than where it started. Here, the trend becomes clear. Year after year, Republicans push further and further for imperialist foreign policy, for xenophobic immigration restrictions, for rich Americans to hoard more and more wealth. Democrats come to appease the masses.
Wait, he just showed a clip there though of Tucker Carlson complaining about Amazon. So I mean, is this the Maoist distributist point? Is he endorsing Tucker Carlson now?
Also, Rich, they raised the specter of empire building, when between Tucker and Trump, you've probably got the most anti-interventionist journalist and president in recent history as well. Like, that's kind of ironic.
Yeah, so true.
Promising they'll be different from the previous administrations, returning power to the people, but always less than they had before and never getting in the way of this greater rightward trend. This isn't to say Democrats never pass progressive legislation. They sometimes...
I actually have a question. If there is a right-wing ratchet, at what point did we experience peak leftism? Like, I'm just curious. Like, how would he answer that question? Right?
That is a really good question.
If we're going constantly to the right, then was peak leftism in the 50s?
10,000 BC.
Was peak leftism in the 20s? Was peak leftism in the 1850s?
No. Fritz was right. It's like reverse Evelo, where we're at this point we're literally in the
Yeah, that I almost feel like we could end the stream right here. I feel like that question just completely destroys the video. Like there's no answer.
I mean, it's that same thing, right? Of like everyone saying we're going to go to the Handmaid's Tale thing, where it's like, was America a theocracy in 1800? Was America a theocracy in 1950? No? Okay, so how is passing moderately social conservatism in the 2000s, or even like that being popular, how is that like theocracy?
Well, okay, but the meaning of the words they're using is essentially anything that's restraining them contrary to their like liberation of their desire. I mean, that's what I really think of when I think of this guy, I think of Vosh, or I think of any of these people. When I think of leftism, I don't necessarily think about equality and communism and everything. I just think of what Deleuze and Guattari, some postmodern academics were talking about, where their concept of describing this was the body without organs, where it's not even necessarily tethered to the reality of your experience, but just this free-flowing desire almost in the moment, where obviously coinciding with their internal utopian,
a body without organs, or you could say men without chests.
Yes, exactly. But it's just like this free-floating liberation of desire that they're going for, and obviously, so that is literally contrary to their sensory experience, because the fabric of reality is essentially reactionary, where the language I'm imposing on you, your experience of everything around you is consistent and ordered in a way, and you just can't change that. You can't stop that from happening too. So it's almost like reality is oppressing you. So that's why everything is just always right wing, and it's just never giving into you. But I mean, I don't know. I think that's the only way to explain this insanity, because it's just mental illness, I think.
Michael Savage was right all along. Liberalism is a mental disorder.
So true. Going forward?
But it remains an exceptionally rare event, especially in
Biden,
comparison to the number of conservative policies that pass. And it's always less than what they promised, less than what they could theoretically achieve, and nowhere close to what would be considered progressive in other developed countries.
So that means they're always doing more than zero. They're doing in the positive progressive.
Absolutely. He contradicted himself just right there. It's just not enough, right? I mean, they're doing progressive, but it's not enough. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's confirming, what Fritz has been saying, where it's just that not enough progress equals right wing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, what he said there, it's not as much as they could have theoretically done. Well, I mean, if you have a majority, I guess, I mean, you could theoretically seize control of government and establish the the USSA. Like I know,
like what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, like what could theoretically, seriously, like that is the most insane. That is the most insane standard I could possibly imagine. You did not do as much as you theoretically could have.
You didn't do what I wanted you to do. I think that's what he's more complaining about.
Yeah, probably. Going forward.
Now, these are all situations where Democrats appear ineffective, where they try but fail to deliver on the demands of their constituents. But they can be far more harmful. Every time they gain power, Democrats adopt some new right-wing policy, pushing the left further outside the realm of acceptable politics, and allowing the right to claim even more outrageous amounts of ideological territory as it adopts, according to some, the
Christianity
of a fascist state.
Oh, come on. This is so
Bibles
unbelievably cherry-picked and dishonest at this point. I didn't actually watch. I listened to the video. I wasn't watching it. This is so dishonest. It's unbelievable. Like the idea that
but I thought Jesus was a brown left-wing Palestinian socialist.
Blessed be his holy name.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this for decades. In the late 60s and 70s, it was law and order. A seemingly innocuous phrase coined by Nixon became realized in full force by Reagan's disastrous war on drugs. Law and order became one of the rallying cries of a political program that threw the black community, black men in particular, in jail with long sentences for so-called broken window crimes.
Criminals shouldn't be punished.
Heavily punished so that the state could showcase its power. Politicians drummed up fear of black and minority criminals while simultaneously terrorizing non-white communities with an over-militarized police force. In the 90s, Democrats latched on.
What happened to the violent crime rate in the 90s? What happened to the violent crime rate?
He doesn't experience that. He's a bougie upper middle class. He doesn't deal with
exactly. He's never experienced.
Remember that Texas school shooting that just happened a couple days ago?
Yeah.
The kid just got released from jail and was posting selfies.
Yeah. There's a bit of a point I want to make, but I want to go through a bit more of this part first.
To this Republican program with their own narratives. You may have heard the term super predator. This super predator, a young criminal with no remorse, became the myth that glued the Democratic tough-on-crime program together.
Okay.
The Clinton administration in particular led its own wave of
Illegal alien
policing
versus
with the
super
infamous
predator.
crime bill, which included what was called 3 strikes lifetime sentencing, put more police on the streets, increased the scope of the death penalty, and of course, put more people in jail than ever before. These are not the policies of a left-wing government. Generally speaking, Democrats are quick to jump on the police state bandwagon. We've
Oh,
seen
you
it
can
when
say
the
that
Biden-
again.
Yeah. Okay. So that's basically enough for the point.
Having police.
No. Let me talk. Okay. Now, one as what I think you're about to say, Fritz. Like the idea of police isn't a right-wing idea. You know, the idea of like jailing people for committing crimes, like this exists, in all modern states. This didn't stop existing anywhere. Now, okay, I understand. In the ANCOM state, they will not have they will not have police. They will instead have ideological enforcement units that will jail anyone that goes against the ANCOM state for mental illness or something. But
ideological commissars, essentially.
Yeah. But no. Okay, I understand that they're saying that like the far left is ideologically opposed to police, and that eventually, when we reach anarcho-communism, we won't have a state, we won't have police. Okay, whatever. But there's obviously nothing inherently right-wing about police in general. Maybe the police can't exist in your ideal end state, but it's something that exists in all real-world societies.
Again, peak leftism had to be before civilization, because Hammurabi, right?
Yeah. Hammurabi was the first right winger, but no. So even more important. So what he's saying here isn't like totally wrong if you're just looking at the 90s. That the left did respond to the right wing law and order stuff, and the left did try and put forward their own law and order agenda. They didn't just push back against it. But his point isn't just that in like small narrow time gaps, the left sometimes responds to right wing policies and puts forward policies that aren't totally dissimilar. His point is that over time, the ratchet effect causes it to go further and further to the right. So this is really testable. Is the criminal justice system today in the United States significantly to the right of the 90s? Like, let's just look at the BLM riots. Like, this is really simple. No, the Democrat law and order agenda is completely gone now. There's nothing even remotely close to this anymore. Yeah, I mean, this was a big thing back then. I get it, and he's not totally wrong if all you're looking at is this one very narrow time frame. But his overall point of the ratchet effect, of the idea that this means that just over time it goes further and further right, completely breaks down. We see the exact opposite. All we see is that this was an attempt by the left to latch on to a popular right-wing concept for a period to help themselves keep in power.
Well, I know it's cliche, but it seems like that pronomian, antinomian dialectic just seems to be as clear as ever here, because, I mean, I would say enforcing laws, putting people in jail, persecuting evildoers, police, and all the real world states that exercise those institutions is inherently right-wing, because it is constraining him. It is enforcing and holding back the forces of the chaotic passions of humanity and everything. So I mean, it does seem in that sense to be right wing, in the stupid way that reality is right wing.
I mean, you can also look into the fact that like they always talk about the failure of the war on drugs and all of that, and it's like, okay, but like the violent crime rate went down considerably during the 90s and 2000s, where it had gone up pretty much year after year in the from the late 1960s to the early 1990s, and surprise, it's going back up again. What could be causing it?
So true. And I just got another super chat. None ya biz for $5. I feel like this video is so convincing to commies that I now want to make and sell Biden is based bumper stickers. Okay.
The Democrats are the real racists, apparently.
The thing to take into account here is all you have to do is sort of cast your eyes over, a Facebook post or news as pertains to, let's just say events that have occurred over the last sort of 2 years or so. And you work out very quickly that these people are not anti-police. What they're upset about is from their perspective, the wrong kind of people are in prison. See, if you terrorize your neighborhood and commit crime, you should be rehabilitated. But if you tell a joke at a bad taste and it offends their sensibilities, then you most certainly should be in prison.
If you take an unguided tour of the Capitol building in January, then you should basically be given the death penalty. But if you burn down your neighborhood in Minnesota, you should be given an award.
Correct. Yeah. Like you sell crack to kids in parks, and yes, you're just someone who's been misdirected, and you can be helped. This is literally their mindset, and it's extremely pervasive.
Okay, let's go on. Still,
administration tries to increase police funding and deploy it against Black Lives Matter protesters. We've seen it with the passage of the Patriot Act by a Democratic-led Senate back in 2001. Over time, Democrats tack more and more right-wing politics onto their agenda, until the Democrats of today begin looking a lot like yesterday's Republicans. There are two main reasons the Democrats act this way. First, they rely heavily on large corporate interests. Weapons manufacturers, the pharmaceutical industry, and fossil fuel companies are some of the most influential sources of funding for both political parties. And so
I just want to note now that we're not going to get into this really today or ever probably. But he listed the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah,
I just we're not going to be talking about that, but I just would like people to reflect on that.
Yes, please reflect. I wanted to comment to. Come on, deploying the police against Black Lives Matter. Get real, get real.
Draw your own conclusions, people.
Will necessarily drag the Democrats further to the right than their constituents and the American people in general want them to go. Just look at the Biden administration's stance on oil drilling. Second, the U.S. works on
natural resources being used is a far-right policy.
A mostly majoritarian model of democracy. In these types of democracies, two parties naturally rise to power and completely dominate the political arena. Whoever has the most votes, that is, electoral college votes, leads the country, naturally creating the incentive to vote for only those parties who stand a chance of winning. In the US, the Democrats and Republicans. This does a few things. One, it stops third parties from gaining any significant traction. After all, why vote for the party you like better if they have no chance of winning? Two, it stops the two big parties from having to actually be accountable to their core voters, who have no choice but to vote for them so long as they remain preferable to the other option, which they always will. There will always be a quote lesser
Cinema just get cornered into a bathroom last week by voters.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's this is another thing just recently of if what he was saying was true here, what you would expect is the Democrats would pass policy, the moderate Democrats would pass policies with the moderate Republicans. But what we're consistently seeing in politics and the Congress in the United States since Joe Biden's been elected is that whenever they can, they're trying to, in the Senate, pass things with 50 Democrats plus Kamala Harris. So I know, it's stupid to try and debunk this stuff. This is all just obviously not true. But everything he's saying, reality just does not map onto it at all. And another super chat from Cringewalker, $5. I think this guy basically watched Dave's introduction on Moldbug and inverted the right-left trichotomy.
Okay, but here's something that I want to bring up, and I'm losing energy, but what interests me is not how this video is wrong, but why in a lot of ways this video is necessary. This narrative is needed by the left because of the audience it's trying to be sold to. And I think I know maybe we'll talk about this after we finish the video, but that's the most interesting thing to me.
That's true. That's interesting. Would you like to expand on that?
Well, it's clear that the big problem with left right now, with millennials in particular, is people are starting to look back and envy the past. How can you be a progressive if that's a common experience without a narrative like this? Was that too cryptic? I'm sorry.
No, it was just so profound.
stunned me with your brilliance.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
I have a sinus thing that's not focusing.
Yeah,
Even
no,
when you're
I
sick,
mean,
you're
I
doing it.
totally agree. The reason why this video is necessary is because the left-wing narrative only makes any sense if they're the rebels.
No, well,
And
there's that. That's always
Yeah.
been true, right? But this is a new thing, right? The left always has to be rebels. That's always been the case. It's been the case in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. But in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, people didn't look back, or at least they had sellable narratives for people looking back to the 50s going, oh man, I wish I could live there. And why you shouldn't think that way. But it's harder to sell that these days,
The
right?
reality is that
Who looked back to the 90s and kind of, probably people here didn't live through the 90s. But a lot of people I imagine are looking back right now and feeling like things were better before. Art was better before, maybe. Music was better. Just saying, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
the 90s were better.
I'm going to say even more than that. It's just that the socioeconomic realities are hitting people, and you can't really ignore them. Like the fact that it is objectively now harder and harder for the average person to have a house, to own property, to be able to form a family. It's just economically becoming less and less feasible. And inflation is hitting harder and harder.
This is less a statement than a question, but is it possible that the left potentially are lamenting their own bio-Leninism and the results of it?
Well, I think this guy is like part of the bio-Leninism here, but
I mean that question of them sort of like yearning for history or believing there were better times or that things have got worse. Like in the end,
right. The rationing to the right. Yeah. I would see that there where they.
Yeah.
So are we saying that maybe they're trying to rationalize their own failures as just being the right?
In a sense, yeah.
Well, that's what they always do.
What they would call victim blaming, in a sense.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
Yeah, but there's one big difference, is that in the 90s, the left had a lot of failures, but they're all acute failures. In the modern day, they're pronounced and metastasizing and global errors. Like, in the 90s, no one said like, oh man, I really wish I could be in 1972. And there were people who wanted the 50s again, but the 50s seemed kind of staid and boring. But now when we're in the 2020s, like, this reality is more boring and more squalid than what happened 30 years ago. And the art's less interesting. Like, that's a hard narrative to incorporate into the typical narrative of progress.
Yeah, they can't do it. And I mean, this is why you see so much soy desperation over, like, thinking like the Marvel movies are awesome or something. Like, they have to get, they have to just they have to manufacture this like love of this profoundly fake and gay culture to like absurd levels, because to stop doing this they would have to confront the reality of how much everything sucks now and it's their fault.
Yeah, that was basically what I was aiming for, Charlie.
Or that, there's all the complaints about how everything is just a remake now. It's the fact that it's not even so much that culture is bad now. I mean, it is. Like, corporate minimalism might be the ugliest thing I've ever seen. But, like, it's like they're just completely incapable of creating anything to do. So all they can do is just kind of profit off of the nostalgia.
Mm-hmm. Woman Rock is saying, and the username is false, is saying the left strategy is to outlaw history, say things have always been bad, and wait until there isn't a generation that knows better times.
The left strategy is eliminate control group.
Oh man, that is so true. Just any
that's not actually particular. I'm just saying that's a general strategy. Any resemblance to particular issues where that term is used is purely coincidental.
Yeah, anybody that doesn't have a nose piercing and face tats.
I was thinking a different kind of piercing. But perhaps we should move on.
Yeah. Super chats quickly first. Narco Republican for $5. I think I have found the point where the right-wing ratchet begins. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. I don't know. I mean, I'd say it's more been all downhill since Jesus ascended into heaven, but something like that, you know. But Son of Tiamat for $5. The modern left are secular Gnostics who hate reality. Yeah, I mean that's pretty accurate. That's more or less true.
Evil. And 3, the two parties must now compete over the same centrist voters to have any chance of winning, forcing them closer ideologically. Since both parties are already dragged towards the right by their wealthy donors fearful of the unruly masses, the center creeps ever so steadily towards the right. And with it goes the entirety of American politics. Every election year, the Democrats elected to the highest levels of power get there by feeding us the same lines. They say, we alone provide an alternative to the past X years of disaster and the objectionable Republican figurehead. We alone are the barrier that prevents the free reign of regressive, conservative politics. Surely you wouldn't vote for the fascist. And yet, in the very same breath, they assure us that they need to work across the aisle, that our democracy hinges on their need to move towards the center and capture the mythical swing voters who decide the election. According to them, this is the only reasonable approach. This is what it means to be electable.
Is he now just saying, saying that American centrist swing voters and all Republicans are fascists? Did he just kind of like pivot to that point now?
Well, I think he was saying where the politicians always say, the left-wing politicians always say, oh, you don't want to vote for the scary conservative fascists or whatever, you don't want to vote for them, as in like the usual trick where they just say they're too radical, you can't let them get elected, so you have to vote for me.
When he's also saying the center and the centrists are being dragged further and further right, he's basically saying all Americans are becoming more right-wing, or at least the majority of Americans are becoming more right-wing.
Doesn't that contradicts what he was saying of left-wing policies are becoming more popular?
Yeah.
No, I mean what he's saying is that among some people, left-wing policies are becoming more popular, but among what's actually being established,
Alabama coal miners, right? Like you mentioned earlier, are naturally left-wing.
Yeah. So true.
While American politics move steadily further right. There is some hope, though. Within the Democratic Party, progressive figures are gaining traction and getting elected. The policies that are considered too far left by corporate Democrats, like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal, are actually the policies that are kicking them out of office and earning their more progressive counterparts a spot at the table. That being said, progressive politicians regularly find themselves defanged by their corporate counterparts. Over time, they are assimilated into the centrist fold with every concession to the party's elite. So, while electoral politics do provide some short-term gains, most notably starting the radicalization process of many apathetic Americans, actual change will only come from popular grassroots movements. If you're looking for ways to get involved, see if any groups near you are looking for help. Joining your local chapter of a national group like the DSA, or any of the several left-wing political parties, or your city's mutual aid collective can have a bigger impact than you think. The main takeaway is this. The United States is run by a two-party corporate duopoly. Both the Republicans and the Democrats are beholden to the same corporate interests. Both parties are dedicated to the maintenance of the untenable and increasingly dystopian neoliberal status quo. Both our major parties are right-wing. This trend will only continue to get worse until the left, the real left, can mount an effective opposition to this deeply flawed and inhumane political project. If we want to make real, positive, lasting change, if we want to safeguard future generations against climate fallout, if we want to stop the inevitable transformation of neoliberalism into outright fascism, we have our work cut out for us. So let's get to work.
Okay, but what's interesting is that he did get something that's technically correct there, where the squad, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC, and all of them, and then Bernie and everything. He made an interesting point where they get incorporated into the centrist neoliberal fold. But he wasn't blaming it on them. He was blaming it on, Pelosi and like the mainstream cathedral people. But it really is them realizing that the incremental approach that the center left is going for is like the only politically feasible approach. And that's why every time one of these rabid progressives gets in, they either become ostracized because they're a true believer and they're insane, or they become sharp and foxy and realize that they need to play with the incremental approach that the people that are already in power are like. So they just end up becoming another corporatist crony. And that's what happens every time. It's like, this guy's doing the same thing that TYT did is like they elect a base progressive and then they become a corporatist because they give in to the neoliberal centrist incremental left-wing policies.
Something I've also noticed is that, and it's common among progressives, and I know he obviously has an audience he's catering towards, but it's like they never even, this is a thing common among progressives or the left, is that they never even conceive of the possibility that a person could rationally disagree with them. It's always like there's us, the good woke progressives. There's the corporate centrist Democrats, and then there's just like this evil kind of seething demon of conservatives or the right wing. It's never like, oh, there are actually people that genuinely disagree with us that rationally came to that idea. That's just an anathema to them.
There's this other crazy point in here that he comes to at the very end where he's like, we have this huge corporate duopoly problem where these two parties basically maintain control because they always trick you into voting for either one or the other. So the solution to Democrats being in collusion with Republicans is to vote for Democrats. I mean, he literally recommends that, right? He recommends voting for Democrats that are good Democrats in his view, and joining these movements that vote for Democrats and put Democrats in power.
Actually,
I don't know. Like, if I could ask him one question, it would be like, does he support boycotting presidential elections until they get someone like Bernie in there?
So he said
because no, I mean, I can understand if what he's saying is vote for progressive Democrats but not moderate. So like if AOC or someone like that is your congressional representative, vote for her. But don't vote for a moderate Democrat. Okay, I mean that makes sense. I understand that, but I mean, is he saying that you should have just voted for the Green Party or stayed home or something in the last presidential election? I really doubt he would say that. In which case, then yeah, he's just buying into the whole system he's criticizing.
Well, no, he did say like you should try voting for alternative left-wing parties, but the problem with that is he admitted that the way the party system is set up, voting for third parties doesn't work.
Well, and he specifically pointed out like AOC and Ilhan Omar as like, these are good politicians, basically.
Guys, I'm close to my heart out, but I guess just want to ask my question. Like, what do people think of the audience for this content? Because I don't know if I really do. I mean, it's been a belief of mine for quite some time that this is the audience that kind of needs to step out of this Vosh, amazing atheist, whatever the heck this guy is. They need to step out of this cycle and do something different. And I guess people think that this audience is just going to keep on buying this stuff. I don't know.
I think I pity the audience because he is just misleading them so much. But I think
they want this stuff. That he's giving them what they want. They want to hear this.
They do want to hear this. I mean, there are some very weird congruencies that we've discussed. Wow, I love that word. I haven't gotten to use that word in a while. Between like the way we view things, particularly neo-reactionaries view things, and what he's saying, just like completely inverted. So maybe in some weird way, there's almost like a vector there to give these people what they want, but from our equal but opposite point of view. I don't know.
I think it's just I think the audience for this is a bit more mainstream than the kind of niches we're in. Where
that's a good thing, right? Because this video is so like mainstream normie. I think these people, the people who listen to this, are the type of normie. I mean, I would have listened to this like 10 years ago and agreed with all of it, right? Just from like a basically like default liberal perspective. I think the audience for this is so huge because the people who are listening to this they're being satisfied by by him like providing some sort of explanation for this deep resentment they feel. But I really don't think it actually comes from like a fundamentally leftist perspective. It's just that's the only perspective they've been given to understand the problem, right? Like that's how these people remain trapped in this loop, is that they're just satisfied in a very like junk food level. Like this is like junk food political content for people, and I think you can actually like break through the junk food if you deliver a highly refined like political meal to these people, if you could only like reach out to them.
To me, it's almost like. Sorry, you can go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's kind of like from a political ideological context, they're sort of or standpoint, they sort of got a bit of a hunger itch, and rather than sort of eating a nice nourishing steak and a bowl of broccoli, they're sort of gone straight for the McWorld burger. But the point I did want to raise also is that just before this, where we paused here, and this is something that you hear about the left all the time, everything that they do is ground roots. Everything is bottom up. And I mean, this is where sort of Moldbug makes a good point of emphasizing this. Rather, it seems that everything they do is top down, and rather than being grassroots, it's astroturfed. But they're so oblivious to their own sort of origin point that they will almost convince themselves that they are a ground roots movement when they're most certainly not. Sorry, continue, Fritz.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like. But like back to what Charlemagne was saying, yeah, it's like they're taking a poison, which is leftism modernity, and they're being told that, well, just the slightly differently flavored version of leftism is going to solve their problems. You know?
Well, I just think
modernity broke. Solution is more modernity.
Well, yes. I mean, that's how it works. I mean, it's like everybody in this cult of power that's here just doubles down. Like that's the only possible explanation every time, is to double down. I mean, are these people really going to consider and go far enough out of the frame to consider like you should have a normal, conservative suburban family life instead, and that'll solve your problems? No, they'll double down into some farther vector into like some kind of weird anime porn or something terrible, and it's just continuous dissociation from reality. And I think, unfortunately, I mean, Charlemagne, you were saying that this might appeal.
I have to bounce. I'm sorry. I'll catch you guys later. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Have a good night.
You too.
Take care, Dave.
Good night.
Yeah.
Hope he bounces very high into the air.
But where was it? You were saying how like this might have scratched your itch 10 years ago. But we also have to consider we're 10 years farther in the degeneration cycle, and that really accelerated with the stuff that's possible with the internet now. And I just think, yes, I understand, this guy's a commie and Adam Friend's a centrist liberal and whatever. There's these political differences here. I comprehend it in that framework, but I just also see it in the fact that I just also see it in it's not like we have to get into Catholic theology or anything. It's just like classical morality, like our understanding of that, where the only solution that these people have been given for modernity is to just take another dose of some kind of vice drug to dull the pain, essentially. And so you have all these people that are just continually giving into their passions, into their vices all the time with this stuff. And I mean, we know what that does. That dulls the reason. Like, how could this guy contradict himself 10 times within the same video? It's because your passion, what you're feeling about a certain idea, will direct you in many contradictory ways. That's how it works, right? It just goes with the wind and everything. So that's what we're dealing with the majority of these people watching it, and with these thinkers that we have. And it doesn't matter whether they're Adam Friended or they're a DSA commie. It really is just the same kind of problem where,
exactly.
Yeah, all they can do is just spew profanity and just like this garbage, this illogical, irrational garbage. Did any of you see the video responses that AA did to Adam and Sitch in those videos about the Coomer question, the female abs? I mean, if anybody in the audience saw it, it's literally like just it's just AA just very stolidly debunking everything they're saying with in-depth, rational arguments and everything. But all they're doing is like this kind of screaming in this this kind of emotive insults and just like spewing stuff and just this unreason.
You're taking away an addict's drug. That's why they're so. That's why
right. And so all these people are addicts. So there's no point in trying to rationally communicate with these people, regardless of whether they're a centrist or a commie.
So basically, what we're hearing essentially is their withdrawal, and they're reeing into the abyss is just that.
They're not even in withdrawal. They're just it's like the same thing with like people that are, anytime you criticize like marijuana, all the potheads just start screaming and saying like, how dare you, and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing is, this isn't even just a problem with centrists or people on the left. Like Dave had he didn't come up with it, but he like kind of brought it up. It's the term the deraciated American dip blanks. The type of guy that will identify as a conservative, but like they love they love my analogy is they love their football, they love America, and they love girls, so they love their F, their A, and their G's, and like they're deraciated. They have like no understanding of culture or tradition, and like unfortunately, I work with a lot of these people. Like I work for a pretty conservative company, but like the guys there are just talking about like the strip clubs they go to, even though they're married, so they're cheating on their wives, and like just all this degenerate crap, and like. It's very just kind of depressing, to be honest.
Yeah, I see a lot of the same stuff.
Critical mass.
It's like I don't care about anything except for cheap sex, cheap booze, and just cheap entertainment with my football.
So I want to comment on something that 21st said about being ruled by the passions. I mean, the reason this guy can get away with all these just sort of lies, essentially, and just cherry picking like out of control is because the way like normie liberal politics brain works is like you don't actually know anything, but you have like these feelings about how the system is working, and because you're so overwhelmingly presented with this one like narrative that's actually very mainstream, but it's supposed to like be the red pill. This guy's like a fake red pill dealer, right? Basically, this guy is just kind of feeding into this feeling of how what people think is wrong, and that's why he's able to not actually like really explain anything in detail. I think if you are actually able to explain anything with very good references and citations, like Moldbug does, then you can actually break through that, because the defensive barrier here, or the thing that holds this thing together, is the appeal to feelings. Like that's what this video is about. Like, one of my friends is basically like he has the exact same opinions that he had like 10 years ago, which were the exact same opinions I had 10 years ago. So he's kind of like this unevolved version of me, basically, and it's interesting to see like how he thinks, because he thinks in this realm of like kind of total ignorance about what's really going on in politics, and only has these like passions about how he thinks the world should be and how it should be run. And that's what this normie level politics runs on entirely. It entirely runs on this like feelings based concept of what's happening, and not actually, it's not attached to reality in any way. And if you can actually like, I think this is why the open letter was so effective for me, is if you can sort of like attach a hook onto one of these normies, onto like incontrovertible facts, that's something that they can't quite break away from. So I think the solution to this video is to kind of do exactly what Yarvin did, only even 10 times more effective than that, and then you can actually peel away some of these people, because they're not fundamentally ideological for the most part. They're very much like blank slates that just sort of follow this default mentality.
I almost think it's even more deep and simple than that. It's like these policies aren't helping you. It's like clearly these ideas, they're not making you a better person. They're not making you happy.
Another thing that's worth
It's
considering.
like somebody
sorry,
in the
what-
chat. Somebody in the chat. I think I don't know if you want to discuss this, but they say he's basically giving you a red-coated blue pill.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
true. Yeah, I mean that's basically what Charlemagne said earlier. But Cringewalker for another $5. I bet if you barred papers from peer review submission, if the author is on antidepressants, you'd cure academia in a week.
That's really funny.
He's essentially saying ban all women from academia. So.
Yeah, but the red coated blue pill thing is really good, because that is what like attracts normies to political content, is that they want to feel like they're getting red pilled, right? And there's this like rebellious anti-establishment vibe to a lot of the mainstream leftist stuff that, you know, gets spammed out in these like documentaries. You know, directors like Roger Stone make content like this, right? Like anti-establishment leftist content feels like you're getting like the real truth and you're getting red pilled. People actually do want this feeling of being red pilled. And I think you can actually red pill some people for this reason. You're never going to red pill like true leftists, but the normies who are really like fundamentally curious, I think it is possible for the audience of this video to be like peeled away in some minor capacity. And you know, this guy has like again over 1 million subscribers. So even if only 1% of did I say Roger Stone? I meant Oliver Stone. Even if only like 1% of the audience could be like peeled away, that's huge by our metrics, right?
Something worth taking into account too, because Charlie, you mentioned this about sort of your friend being the unevolved sort of virgin version of you, and also the content of this leftist video, and how, you know, given what one's past sensibilities might have been, or a person's given cynicism towards the system and not understanding a better way out, and how the open letter and Moldbug's work sort of opened your mind to that. I think it's true to say that there are people out there, you know, and whether it's that, you know, between yourself and I can't remember if it was 21st or Fritz has said it, but like these, you know, these sort of normie guys, you know, who are into football and drink beer and, you know, might go to strip clubs or do infidelity, whatever. They might have some feature in there that makes them realize that something's wrong, but they sort of default to this behavior. And I think a large part of the problem is, and this is where sort of the left again have really secured their position by their march through academia and then march through mass media and just being able to suppress a lot of this information. But, you know, not everyone has the inclination to, say, pick up a copy of Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire and read it and get some perspective on what happens when civilizations fail. Like, not everybody's going to come across Moldbug's, you know, Moldbug's work, or he's going to watch AA's videos, or even, you know, whether it's yourself, Charlie, or Settler, or guys in our sphere, you know, and just not having the tools. Sadly, so sorry, I'm nearly done. These people don't have the tools to really get to the bottom of it, and the problem is they fall into down the cracks of these easy answers that the left puts in their face, and that's a real tragedy.
Yes, I agree with that, but to even go farther, where, yes, I mean, most of the people don't really have the intellectual faculties, and that's obviously not their fault and everything, but also the passions mire their reason, and that's true. But I want to go farther than that. It's not just
totally. I agree with you there too, by the way.
Right. It's also just the moral aspect of it. So the giving into the passion, so they're just going with the wind and contradict themselves all the time and can't really have full reason. It doesn't just darken their intellect; it really does darken their heart, where they just become disposed to attach themselves to these really wicked things, and the kind of, you know, I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but just essentially the good becomes harder to appeal to them because of this darkening that we're experiencing here. And I just think that's the sole problem here, because when I hear, I wish Dave was still, I wish I told this to Dave before he left, but it's like when the people he was going on that stream with, Adam and Sitch, I don't want to make it all about Adam and Sitch, but they're just an example here. When they really ask him stuff like, oh, really, is porn damaging? What study did you get that from? Or, oh, is it more increased? What it really is just duplicitousness. And maybe it's subconscious or something, or really, but all these people are kind of blocked by that depravity. And since we're, decades farther with this stuff, it just becomes harder and harder. And it doesn't really start with the reasoning, in my personal opinion. It starts with they have to stop engaging in those habits. But the problem is, how is anybody supposed to stop them from doing that stuff? You don't control their life. And so it's just this stuck in this revolving door of decline.
Exactly. It's a bit like, anyone who watched A's video, well, what was it this morning for me, but, last night or yesterday, where he quoted Augustine, and he used the quote that a man has as many masters as he has vices. And I think that's sort of, whether I'm using the phraseology of the cathedral correctly, this is where the cathedral has played a masterstroke by sort of, by being able to deploy all these mechanisms that have sort of place these people in chains and chains of their own passions. It has really hunkered them down into this pattern of behavior that you're describing, 21st.
One really interesting thing I've noticed lately about like how passions control people. Often when I hang out with my friends, like at workout night, one of them will often basically tell us stories and show us just like how many hot girls he's having sex with, right? And I have this other friend that he tends to talk to more about it. And this guy is like a very Dionysian person. And he also has these vices, but I find it really interesting to observe them in conversation, because this one friend who also has these vices, he sort of knows their vices, and he's actually been harmed by them pretty badly very recently. So I have this friend who's sort of like showing off his like sexual conquests, but the dynamic has changed over the years to where like kind of everyone else is more adopting this conservative attitude. It's not so much like judgmental, but more like, that's kind of like degenerate and you probably shouldn't do it because like
an awareness
it's actually harming you.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to watch this evolution play out in my personal friend group that's quite old at this point, and how some people don't move and some people do, and there's very if you really pay attention, there's these interesting subtle changes in the way we talk to each other. And so this gets into the concept I've touched on a few times, where it's like sometimes we talk about on the right, and I think AA does this too much, where we take this attitude like people are just like fundamentally unreformable, but like basically AA also says this correctly, like basically everyone is a degenerate now. And I think sometimes we have this idea that like the normie like can't evolve their attitudes or like learn to put these passions under control and like better their lives in very significant ways, which my other friend is actually doing right now, right? And it's like the more he's like improving himself, the more he's realizing that these like this more like Dionysian style of living is actually like very destructive. And even though like he's still like when he like engages in these vices, he enjoys it. He's very cognizant of the fact that these are vices. And I notice this is always like the first step in getting over vices. It's like realizing it is actually a vice and an addiction. It's really interesting to like watch this happen over the course of like years. So I think I would not discount like I wouldn't discount the how many people we can actually bring over more towards like the way we view the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a nutshell, you've described the kind of people who have higher prospects of redeemability and those who do not. That's
That summarizes that.
Thing is, the way this works kind of organically in a functioning and stable society is that men and women, particularly men, have people called fathers and like community leaders that they look up to that emulate positive behavior, and they're able to emulate that. The problem is that that's all broken down now, and so like the only thing they have left to is to follow their passions. They don't have like this this like successful masculine figure that's pointing them into a different direction and like guiding them. So I think this is a problem with a lot of normies, is that people need leadership. People need examples to follow. Sorry.
Yeah. Role models.
Yes.
And this is also one of probably the best vectors of attack, actually, for those of us who do not like the left. If you think that their obsession with breaking down family, the structure of the family itself and family values, of the notion of a tight knit community and of sort of kin/in group, that's where often a person's best role models will lie, and the absolute obliteration of that by the cultural left over the last 50 years has been fundamental in depriving individual people of those role models and those elders who once upon a time provided that for them.
Whoa. How could they do that? That's awful.
One of the really interesting things I've noticed too, just thinking about my friend group dynamics, is like this particular friend as well, like we'll get into conversations about how like watching streamers is basically like degenerate, and like we'll get into arguments with my other friends about how like it's like the same as like, I don't know, watching football or something. And it's interesting because he's kind of like I would say he's like the person who's been most afflicted by modernity. And it's almost like it kind of seems like the people who end up like going through the ringer the most actually become most cognizant about like how damaging the modern world can be to you if you don't like assert this like Herculean effort to overcome it. So I would say even people like who you would regard as like a complete degenerate, you shouldn't even like count them out, because there's almost this like reversal that's possible where you almost have to like really know like how awful things can get to actually develop a more reactionary perspective on them. It's a very interesting thing.
Charlie. Yeah, I actually agree with you there to a large degree. Like the ability to sort of know how deep the hole is, you have to have fallen into it. And once you've climbed back out, you have a realization of just how dark that pathway is. I do agree.
Mm-hmm.
You're slowly unblack-pilling me. It's very impressive. I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, like most dissident right people are just people that experienced some kind of trauma that was outside of the bell curve of the normal life or whatever. So they were kind of thrown out of the system or thrown down the well, and then they creeped out, right? And that's how the dissident right is. Like half the people have some psychological trauma or something like that.
And 100% of them are autistic.
Well, it's funny is in Robert Cardinal Seurat's book Days Now Far Spent, he literally describes like kind of a lot of the problematic attitudes of the modern world as were like, he just describes them as autistic.
Does he use that word?
Yes, he uses the word autistic.
Whoa, based.
It's the great enemy.
Okay.
It's we risk like becoming a machine, divorced from humanity.
And for the extreme degenerates that you were talking about, it's not just that situation that Charlemagne was talking about anecdotally. There was other people that I'm familiar with where they were saying that they were around some of the worst kids, like the kinds of kids that would go on TV, like those upper brass progressive elite kids, which is about as bad as it can get. And behind closed doors, even those people would admit, yeah, I mean, what I'm doing is like damaging me or whatever, but I just don't want to give it up, essentially. It's like even the most ideologically progressive and just crazy and degenerate people, they admit that essential truth there and like just flat on its face. and it's kind of shocking.
Yeah, so true. I feel like now is a good point to end this. We're gone over 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone have any closing remarks?
Yes.
Nah, not everyone all at once.
Go to church.
Yes.
So true.
Do your devotions, rosary every day. I'm gonna make a Catholic devotions video tomorrow or this week or something. But yeah, I mean that's the only way to come out of this. Get out of the vices, and then you can make based autistic arguments.
Well, you can just
So
make
true.
based arguments.
I don't.
I feel like it's
Imagine
expecting
a
a
world
lot
free of
from both the people on this panel and the audience to not make autistic arguments.
Look, I'm fine. I have ADD. I'm the other side of the spectrum. I can't concentrate on anything.
But yeah, Sam for Sam153 for $5. Tip for a nourishing discussion. Thanks. Yep. So yeah, I mean, shill, I guess. Who wants to shill first?
Well, I'm gonna try and put out a Halloween themed video this year or this month, and I'm also want to try streaming again because I kind of find that fun. I'm actually gonna play good games, so maybe look for that. I'll make some announcements on my Twitter.
Okay. Charlemagne.
Yeah, so once again, subscribe to the blog, charlemagne.substack.com. I just did a podcast today that I think will come out on Wednesday on Peter Quinones's channel. I think the podcast is Free Man Beyond the Wall, so check that out. We talked about the blog I just put out on Substack, criticizing libertarianism, and I think people will find that very interesting. I guess I'll shill on Dave's behalf too. He also has a Substack. He's publishing essays there more frequently lately, so go find Distributist on Substack as well. And of course, check out Academic Agent's cigar streams every Friday. I'm appearing on them more frequently again. I think I'm probably going to take a break this Friday, though, just because, I've been doing a lot of streams lately. But we have a new formula where we're really doing deep dives into texts and studying them beforehand. So that's going to be some top tier content for the next several months based on what we have planned out.
Okay. Hector Newman. Yeah, I know. I know I need to make videos again. It's been a while. Sorry.
Well, this is my problem too. It's I feel like there's nothing to say anymore in these types of videos. Because
yeah, I know. I mean, there's several things I've been meaning to make videos about. And there's always the classic response video. I know that I've been wanting to do book review videos more. I think I've done 2 book review videos so far on my channel. The
problem is that YouTube algorithms and the whole way everything is set up now is that unless you're have millions of subscribers like the guy that made the video, it's kind of designed now to push people towards streaming since it's so hard to actually get anything from just making short edited videos.
Yeah, and I mean, these streams recently have been doing really well.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with streaming. It's just
no. I mean, I do consider the edited videos to be my real product. I consider the streams more to just be a side thing. But I've been busy both personally. I've been kind of sick of politics, which is always funny for a guy who runs a political YouTube channel. And yeah, I don't know. I am really trying to get back to it. This next week is a really busy week for me though, so I really doubt I'll get one out this week. But I don't know. Hopefully, there's one video in particular I'm working on. Hopefully, if not out this week, which probably won't, it'll be out next week. But yeah, Jacaranda Plus for $2 says something that is disgusting, and I will not say it. But thank you for the money. And Furious, go ahead.
Just to reiterate what Charlie said, Charlemagne. AA is doing these wonderful bunch of streams. Actually, him and I were on last night when we covered a book called Jihad vs. McWorld, which was really good. And this system that AA has set up is really good, really interesting. Where we're sort of reading texts and discussing them in detail is a good deal of fun and really insightful, actually, depending on the subject matter at hand. So yeah, definitely, if anyone who's interested in that, check that out. And of course, where I obviously come from was from Apostolic Majesty channel. So we just started this week again, where we've been basically canvassing European history from from the Bronze Age to Bismarck. So definitely tune in. We'll be back on next Monday night, I think, for you guys over in the States and Britain. We're talking about Burgundy and the latter part of the French Kingdom sort of period, the end of the Middle Ages. So be sure to join us, and actually Settler as well. I've been somewhat of a lurker of your server for a long time. So indeed, thank you for having me on today. It was actually good. It was a pleasure to be on at last. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no worries. What else? Everyone's chilled, I think. 21st.
Wow.
You have anything to say?
Yeah.
I mean, you were like sharing devotions or something. I thought that was like your chill time, but go ahead if you have more.
Yeah. Well, yes, do the Catholic devotions. Basically, those are super powerful and important because we're in trouble. I'll make a video mentioning a few of them. Join the church if you haven't already. The solution here is going to be a moral renewal, not just an intellectual renewal.
Unironically about like that. I get a lot of messages. I mean, not tons, but I get a significant number of messages of people with questions about Catholicism. So if you want to message me about that, if you have questions, if you're considering me,
there's also a wonderful podcast that's radio show every day done called Catholic Answers.
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, no, I mean, if you want to ask me, personally, I can put you, I can give you resources and stuff. If you have any particular questions, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my abilities. So yeah, message me over Twitter. My DMs are open, or Discord. But yeah, if you're interested in becoming Catholic, feel free to message me there.
And once you ask him the questions, go and watch the devotions video I post so that you do those life-saving devotions that will, help you.
Yeah, so true. So is that it, 21st, or do you have anything else?
Yeah, that's good.
Can I just answer a quick question? Someone just added me just before. Yurik asked me when we're finishing Byzantium. Apostolic Majesty's been very gracious, knowing that the subject upsets me, but I believe we're getting to the Ottoman Byzantine transition in about 3 weeks' time. So they'll culminate the fall of Constantinople, and the Ottoman period, I believe, will be 2 or 3 streams from now.
Can I at least say something that might make you upset? Is as much as I lament the fall of Byzantium, I have to admit the Ottomans had some peak aesthetic with the Janissaries.
Yes, I will agree with that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's it. What's else to say? I don't know. Pray. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
God bless everyone.
Retain your sperm.
Amen.